大家好，今天我们请来 Randy Boldt 先生一起和大家讨论一下关于曼省商业投资移民项目。我叫李博文，在 Visamax 公司工作。Hi Randy， 今天您能不能给大家介绍一下曼省投资移民项目的这个商业投资移民项目的基本要求呢？
Sure I can, Bowen. The program is fairly basic. All that you have to have is a minimum net worth of $350,000, which is about 1.3, 1.4 million RMB. You have to be prepared to invest $150,000 into an active business in Manitoba, and prior to approval, you have to make a deposit of $100,000 to the province of Manitoba, which is refunded to you once you've completed your investment. These are fairly basic criteria, and there's much more to the program than that, but that is the basics of the program.
Okay, thank you very much. 这个项目是从什么时候开始运行的？另外，这个项目是不是很稳定？
I started the program in the year 2000 when I was working for the province. So it has been going for a long time. This is its 16th year. Although there has been some hiccups or some interruptions to the program, it is generally speaking the most stable business program among the provinces, perhaps with the exception of Quebec. But it has been around for 16 years, and it accepts applications and processes them on a first-come, first-served basis. But now it has an expression of interest process, so you have to meet a certain criteria. But it is a pretty stable program.
That's great. 非常好。您能给大家介绍一下该项目的大致的申请过程吗？
The application process is very complex, I have to admit. To begin, in order to qualify, in order to get enough points, you have to undertake an exploratory visit, and that gives you the necessary number of points to be invited to apply. Once you have completed your exploratory visit, you then have to do an expression of interest. And if you achieve the minimum number of points that are in the next draw, then you get invited to apply. You submit the application, or you have 60 days to submit the application, including a business plan. And the province will typically send out what's called a pre-assessment notification, which you have to respond to. And then they will interview you. After their successful interview, you will be approved. At that time, you have to then make a $100,000 deposit, and you will then, and only then, obtain your nomination. With that nomination, you can apply for your federal application, which takes about a year. And once you've obtained your federal approval, you then come to Manitoba to start your business. So there's no question there's a great number of steps involved, and it's a very complex process.
OK， 非常感谢。目前曼省商业投资移民项目的网站上讲，只有60分的时候，您就可以符合条件来申请这个项目。目前按照您理解的60分会不会受到邀请？
There's no question that 60 points will not get you invited. Although it is the minimum number of points that are required, no one has been invited under the new process at 60 points. The confusion arises because when the government stopped the program back in 2012, what they did is they allowed, or they invited everybody who qualified to apply, and that meant going down to as low as 60 points. But under the new process, that's not the way it works. Under the new process, only the top 10 people every week get invited. And for most of this period, since they're beginning to invite people again, only people above 80, and even now, only about people with 82 and above are being invited. And we don't really expect it to go below that. So it's going to stick around 80 to 84 points with every draw. So definitely 60. If someone tells you 60 or 65 or 75 is enough, that's not true. Nobody's going to get invited with that level.
非常感谢 ，Thank you very much。考察5天来曼省的考察是曼省移民部官方网站上的要求。那在考察过程当中要注意哪些内容呢？
So, Bon, the minimum requirement is really 7 days. It has to be at least 5 full business days. So from Monday to Friday, which really means 7 or 8 days that you have to be here in Manitoba. So during the exploratory visit, you have to do things that you would expect to do if you were coming to a new country to look at investing and living. So that means that you have to meet with lawyers, accountants, you have to look at businesses to purchase, you have to look at schools where your children would attend schooling, you have to look at universities, and you have to look at cars, you have to look at houses, the full gamut of things that you would expect to do if you were actually going and looking for a place to move and invest. It's important not to think about it in terms of just fulfilling your obligations for the program. You need to look at it as a way of actually doing the work that you would expect to do while you were moving to a new place. So that's what we try to help the client with.
That's great, thank you. 商业计划书是申请该项目当中非常重要的一个环节。那您会协助申请人来准备商业计划书吗？
Thank you. The business plan is the client's business plan. We make no bones about it. It's their business plan. But we do provide assistance and guidance. So what we try to do is we try to help them find a business plan that makes sense for them. So everybody is different. Everybody has a different background. And we try to find a business that not only suits their background, but also suits the local economy. It's no good in finding something that suits their background, but has no relevance here. And it's no good in finding a good business here if they have the ability of running it. So we try to find the right business that suits the local environment and their background.
That's great, thank you. 目前中国申请人的获批率大概有多高？
Unfortunately, Bone, only 30% of Chinese clients are being approved these days. Last year, it was only 30%, and the year before the same, the year before that. So we see 70% of Chinese applications being refused.
那为什么中国申请人的拒签率这么高？
Well, I think this is a function of several things. One, unlike many other provinces, Manitoba is not that clear in providing details on what they expect for source of funds. So this causes a great deal of confusion. The second thing is that a lot of Chinese consultants who are providing or who are submitting their clients to the program don't really understand the process or don't understand what's required and are often submitting either people who can't qualify, who don't have the necessary documents, or more commonly what they do is they provide false documents. And so both of them are going to run into problems. If you provide false documents or if you don't have the necessary documents to satisfy the province, you're going to get refused, period.
OK， 那我们如何做才能提高我们的获批率呢？
Well, there are two ways to improve your chances of approval. One is make sure you only provide true documents. Don't provide any false documents, and don't let your advisors convince you to provide false documents. You have to understand that the province of Manitoba and the government of Canada have a great deal of ability of finding out real information about Chinese applicants. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but they hire private investigators, they search databases, and they even have agreements with the Chinese government. So whatever you do, don't provide false documents. Secondly is, if you're going to go and apply for this program, you have to find somebody who knows about the program, not just somebody who's promoting the program, but somebody who has a long track record at the program who actually understands about how to do a source of funds. for the province. Manitoba's source of funds calculation is different than any other province or than any other country. So you have to be aware of it, and you have to find the people who are good at it.
Okay, thank you. 那我们现在目前呢有一个客户，那他的状况呢是作为小企业主，在中国很长时间没有交过个税，或者交的个税非常少。那根据您的经验，像这样的客户是不是要去税务局补税呢？
That's an interesting question, and one that I know a number of Chinese consultants are advising their clients to do. Simply paying amount of tax to the Chinese government doesn't in any way, shape, or form verify your income. All it does is it shows that you've paid some tax. You don't have payroll receipts. You don't have the kind of documents that one would expect to prove income. All you're doing is getting a tax receipt. That is not the kind of thing that is going to be that is going to get you approved. Also, it's very expensive. I mean, we recently saw somebody who tried that approach, who was advised by a Chinese consultant to pay their taxes, and they ended up paying something like $50,000 in income tax for nothing. They still got refused. You can't just simply pay your tax and think that's the only verification. No, our approach is different. I mean, there is the province is not expecting Chinese business owners to pay tax as they would in Canada, or to pay tax as a senior manager would. But we have to provide some analysis, a detailed analysis of where their money came from. But that doesn't involve retroactively paying tax, no.
Great, thank you, Randy. 那我们应该如何准备这个资金来源解释呢？这是一个非常复杂的一个话题。
The source of funds is the most important document to prepare for the application. And unfortunately, the province doesn't provide a lot of guidance on that. So to prepare a source of funds, you have to go right back to the beginning. There's two major time periods that are important. One is when the person actually initially invested in the company. You have to be able to provide some reasonable evidence, not perfect evidence, but reasonable evidence that they actually had enough money to invest. One of the difficulties is that many Chinese companies have not truthful capital verification reports. They work with the company registrar, their accountant, to show that they have $5 or $10 million in initial capital, when effectively they only have $100,000. If you don't have 5 or 10 million and you show it on your capital verification report, you know what? You're likely to get refused. It's almost impossible to overcome that, because you've actually provided false documents to a wide number of government departments, and it's not true. And now you're going to expect the Canadian government to accept those as well. It's not true. So that's the first problem. The second one is over the last 5 years. You have to be able to provide a source of funds for the last 5 years of your personal income. And that is a little bit easier because it involves personal bank statements, and we can work with those personal bank statements with accounting firms.
Okay, thank you, Randy. 曼省移民部是如何审核这些申请人的资金来源解释？他们是用什么样的办法来进行调查的？
It's surprising how much information is available now to Canadian and provincial governments in Canada. This information is widely available through government departments, and furthermore, the Manitoba government asks for a personal credit report from each applicant. And this is all augmented by a couple of things. One is that the government of Canada has arrangements with the Chinese government to provide information. And secondly, the government of Manitoba hires private investigators, Chinese private investigators, for every single business applicant. And they actually visit the company, phone the company, and do a detailed analysis of the individual and their background, and do a search across the internet at every government department they can possibly find, and review the banking information. And often, even calling up the bank it's very common for them to call the bank up and obtain information directly from the bank. So the government of Manitoba and the government of Canada go into a great deal of research about every single applicant. And most Chinese applicants don't appreciate the level of depth of information that is available about them.
Okay, that's perfect. 那客户从世界各地来的客户，或者说中国的客户，能否和 Visamax 公司直接对接呢？还是必须要和当地的中国中介公司一起来申请？
Yes, absolutely true. We prefer to work directly with applicants. In fact, we no longer work with any Chinese agents. We find it's far, far too difficult to work with a third party. We're only after working with people directly so that we can get true information from them as opposed to from a third party. We found that when we work with third parties in China, we would often have difficulties or conflicts because we would ask for true information. The client would want to provide true information, and a third party would try to convince them otherwise. So we stopped working with third parties. I'm the only non-Chinese speaker in the company. All of our other 6 staff speak fluent Chinese. They're born in China, they speak Chinese. We have a Chinese lawyer on staff who's very capable, Chinese commercial lawyer on staff, who's spent 15 years in a commercial law firm as a partner in China, and she's here with us full-time and can and does review all of the Chinese documents to ensure their validity, to ensure that they comply with Chinese law. And so we definitely are in a position to work directly with Chinese consultants or Chinese clients, probably more than anyone else. I doubt there's anybody who has our background in China or in Canada in terms of this particular program and in terms of having this amount of expertise.
Yeah, that's great. Good to hear. 那如果中国申请人现在想计划和 Visamax 公司对接，那他们第一步应该做什么呢？
The process starts by an interview. We typically obtain some basic information about the client, and then we sit down and we interview them remotely. We interview them on Skype, on WeChat, or FaceTime, and we interview them typically for an hour. We ask questions, and if there's some reasonable possibility of getting them approved, we then ask for documentations. And typically the kind of things that we want to see from them would be copies of their bank statements, personal bank statements, and copies of their financial statements and their capital verification reports. We would then review those and probably have a second interview, and only after we reviewed all of the documents and made an assessment about their chance of being approved will we go to the next step, which is to issue a contract, apply for a visitor visa, and then undertake the exploratory visit. But we want to make sure that the client has a very good chance. We don't want to fool the client and pretend that they're going to have a good chance if they don't. We only accept clients who have a good chance of being approved.
Okay, that's great. 你们可以用中文来沟通或者解释个案，对吧？
Yes, as I said, all of our staff except for me have the ability of working in Chinese, and we're more than capable of accepting clients directly.
That's great, thank you. 您还有其他的任何建议吗？
The most important thing when you're selecting someone to work with as your representative is to find somebody with experience and honesty. If you work with a client or a consultant who is going to suggest to you to provide adjusted documents or falsified documents, run a mile away. You will have a 95% chance of being refused. It's far better to work with somebody who's knowledgeable, who can work with whatever documents you have and help provide explanations and answers rather than providing false information. It's very difficult to find, in fact, to be quite honest, it's impossible to find this kind of consultant or this kind of advisor in China. And I have to also tell you that if you're working with a third party outside, like in Vancouver or Toronto, these people typically don't have the relationship, the background, the understanding of what's required. They're relatively new in terms of dealing with Manitoba, and they really don't have a great track record. I mean, they have a very, very high refusal rate. So it's much better to deal with people who are with local, who have a great deal of expertise, and who only will work with true information.
That's great. Thank you very much, Randy.
谢谢。
我想跟大家说呢，就是如果说您对 Visamax 公司还有任何其他的问题，可以在我们的网站上进行沟通。另外 ，Randy 先生今天讲的所有的英文的解释，我们会在视频当中用中文给大家标注出来，所以很多的信息大家可以了解。感谢大家的收看，下次再见。